after the fawning media commentariat tripped over each other to offer sympathy to a Prime Minister who apparently tried her best to fulfil Brexit and tackle injustice in the UK, let's have a look at the real legacy of Theresa May. Unlike some, to me, this is a truly wonderful photograph. It's a reminder to all those arrogant occupiers of high office that they're not immune from defeat. Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, breaks down in front of television cameras after being toppled by her own government and party. She'll be remembered for a shambolic period of office that presided over a parliament of nothingness that achieved not a thing of substance and that failed to deliver her key Brexit policy that has enveloped the entire country for 3 years. Her political career initially saw a hateful reign over the Home Office for 6 years, where she oversaw the creation of the disastrous hostile environment policy, Go Home vans, the deepening of the Islamophobic Prevent programme as part of a pernicious so-called counter-extremism strategy, countless deportations, mass surveillance, and even an attempt to scrap the Human Rights Act. She was one of the most rabidly racist and anti-immigrant members of David Cameron's cabinet. After the EU referendum, she rode on Cameron's coattails into 10 Downing Street, where she swaggered around with total hubris, triggering Article 50 and setting down impossible red lines without first developing even a semblance of a plan for how to resolve Brexit. She then threw away her parliamentary majority all on her own, despite initially having a 20-point lead in the opinion polls, leaving her at the mercy of the dogmatic and bigoted Democratic Unionist Party and her fanatical conservative backbenchers in the European Research Group. It was precisely from that point that her fate was sealed. Rather than recognising her debilitated position and reaching out to make a compromise with parties across the House of Commons, something she never genuinely tried to do, even till her last moment, she buried her head in the sand and pressed on with an undeliverable Brexit plan. That resulted in bringing back a deal that was unacceptable to Parliament. It could neither be swallowed by the opposition parties nor by her own. Next, with complete disdain for parliamentary processes, she refused to hand over the Attorney General's full legal advice on her deal, which resulted in her government being the first in British history to be found in contempt of Parliament. She was then handed the largest government defeat in British parliamentary history, and scoffing at our constitutional conventions, she refused to resign and instead brought back the exact same deal twice more, despite the obvious fact that it was never going to pass. She then ran down the clock in a vain attempt to intimidate members of Parliament into approving her deal through the looming fear of a no-deal Brexit. As ever, her obsession with short-term tactics meant she made another strategic error. She was forced to seek 2 extensions to the Article 50 deadline, plunging the UK into European Parliament elections, despite repeatedly promising to deliver Brexit by the 29th of March 2019. Every step of the way, her myopic, undemocratic tactics led her deeper and deeper into the abyss. She wasted away valuable time on internal Conservative Party management and on trying to survive for as long as possible as Prime Minister, rather than working in the national interest which she claimed to hold so dear. It's without a shadow of a doubt that Theresa May must own this all as her failure. She didn't try to fulfil Brexit. She tried to bully Parliament and the country into submitting to her will in the belief that she was an authoritarian mastermind. Well, she was dealt a very rude awakening indeed. Without even taking Brexit into account, throughout her 3 years in office, she failed to pass any meaningful legislation. Her banal, platitudinous rhetoric when she first took office in 2016 about tackling burning injustice and prejudice and creating a country that works for everyone rather than a privileged few, fell flat on its face at the stark reality of her premiership. Millions of people having to visit food banks, worsening homelessness and rough sleeping, the devastating rollout of universal credit, a heightened mental health crisis, increased misery for disabled people, unending austerity and cuts to public services, and shamefully, a UN investigation finding that 14 million Britons live in poverty, many of them children. Those are just some of the things that should weigh on Theresa May's conscience. And how could anyone forget her disgraceful response to the Grenfell disaster, where she instigated a farce of an inquiry and couldn't even bring herself to meet the survivors or ensure they were properly rehoused. Who could ever forgive her for the heartbreaking Windrush scandal, where Black Britons, many of whom have now died, were deported from their country in the name of the hostile environment policy for whom she was the architect? Who could brush aside her desperate and embarrassing sycophancy towards Donald Trump, one of the most detestable and racist people to be elected President of the United States in recent history? Who could ignore her bellicose behaviour that led to her exercising the prerogative power to deploy British military force without parliamentary approval, something no Prime Minister had done for 15 years? And who could disregard her saying that she'd be prepared to authorise a nuclear strike that could kill 100,000 men, women and children with total callousness and no hint of reservation in her voice? Theresa May will not only be remembered as an appalling Prime Minister, but as an awful human being who made history for all the wrong reasons and who deserved everything that came her way.